Hey guys, how's it going? Board now back with you, and this is going to be my review of Unbelievable Episode 8, the finale, the Netflix miniseries. So I finally arrived at the end. Sorry this review has been so delayed with a busy October period for horror movies and reviews, but I'm finally completing this series, and as you'll know from my other reviews, I've been very positive on it. I've absolutely loved it, and I think this finale delivers as well. It really pays everything off very nicely and left me anyway in a very satisfying place, and it does a great job of bringing the two halves of the story together, which they've been paralleling over the course of the 8 episodes. So I'll get into that, and I'll talk why I think it lands such a great punch at the end. And I'll finish with the Marie stuff because that feels particularly poignant because we bring those two halves of the story together. But first I'll sort of deal with the details of the actual case and the Karen and Grace side of things. So Christopher, who they arrested in the previous episode, they also arrested his brother because they found out they live in the same house and they look almost identical. So they needed, DNA evidence and to sort of separate them, and they finally came to the conclusion, or the evidence was there, then it was Christopher who was the perpetrator. So they're going forward with the court case, and so there's a bit of back and forth in this episode. Christopher, obviously, with his lawyer, as they're going forward to trial, essentially he knows that he's caught, then he is going away, but it's just a case of how long he's going to go away for, and can he sort of whittle it down to a smaller sort of sentence. So he's trying to use as much leverage as he can to try and get the term down. So he says to Karen and Grace, he says that he'll admit to the rapes if they drop the charge of kidnapping, and they go to the victims with this, and they ask the victims, and I think they sort of go along with it. But there's another little detail, which is then there's a file on the computer which has some important history involving Christopher, and this is brought up. Then they would like to know what other crimes he has committed. So the idea is that this file will uncover that, so they could potentially get him for even more offences. So they want that as part of the condition. They want him to give them the password so they can uncover the file. And he refuses to do that. But anyway, they move forward to the court case, to trial, and as part of the victims, this is obviously a right they have, but they insist that they want to be there. They want to confront Christopher. And this is a very cathartic sort of thing, which it's open to the individual person. A lot of people wouldn't want that sort of trauma, that sort of... It would just be too much for them to be face to face again with such a person. But, they decide this is a big moment. We need to do this. We need to confront him. And it's kind of what a lot of this series has been about the sort of power dynamics and the struggles and the almost inequality between the victims and their perpetrators, and also obviously going into the justice system, how sometimes the justice system seems crooked and, not on the victim side. So this is a big cathartic moment. So we have a whole scene in court where they do confront Christopher, and they really get they really get a lot of stuff off their chest. You know, they say, "Why me?" They confront him. It's a whole various thing, because obviously at this point they do have enough to put him away, but it's just how long he's going to go away for, and it's about making sure, really, then he never gets out, or then he at least has a very long sentence, which would, yeah, limit the chance of him ever offending again. So Grace decides to speak on behalf of the victims, like with a closing sort of statement. And again, I'm not sure if this is a dramatic contrivance they decided, or I mean, it's probably quite believable. Then, as a representative, she would be allowed to do this, but it obviously works well for the drama. In any case, it's fitting because Grace and Karen have been such, supporters of the victims, and it's been so much their story because they've been the face of it, even though the crimes didn't actually happen to them. So Grace gives a very powerful speech in court on the behalf of the victims, and the gist of it is she just says to the judge, if you release him, they won't feel safe. And that's the most striking thing about it, and it ends up going their way, and Christopher ends up getting the maximum penalty. He gets without being sentenced to death, but he's given life in prison. And actually, what's great about the American legal system, or I mean, what's right about it anyway, I don't know if I would say great, but I think what's right about it is the fact that if you get a life sentence over there, life does mean life. I mean, obviously, if some evidence comes up and it's proven then the person wasn't guilty later, then that's different. But generally, if they're given a life sentence, unless it's later overturned, with new evidence, life does mean life over there. So that is worth saying. I mean, there's a lot of faults you can pick with the criminals justice system in America. I think there's way too many loopholes which can be exploited. So that's one negative I would say about it. But a positive is the fact that, yeah, life means life. If they give a life sentence, that person is going to spend the rest of their life in jail, which is the way it should be. And that's something which doesn't happen enough over here. Quite often they get a reduced sentence, or they can plead, or they're released early. And yeah, that's just not right. I mean, when it's a serious crime like this, and when it's multiple counts, he's obviously raped multiple women, and it all stacks up. So an extreme crime should lead to an extreme sentence. Not extreme, that's the wrong word. A just sentence. He should get life in prison, and so that's what he gets. So that's one of the big sort of payoffs in the episode. It's a great moment for the victims. It's a great cathartic moment, and it does pay everything off. It sort of justifies kind of a lot of the torment, a lot of the trauma, and a lot of the tough scenes we've seen them go through, and that we've gone through as a viewer. So it all sort of ties up quite nicely. We get Karen and Grace celebrating with their husbands, like they go out celebrating, and that's a sweet little scene because it's actually nice to see them. They've come from the stage where at the start of the series, or when they first met anyway, when they first started working together, then they were at odds. They were completely different, and they've had some harsh words back and forth. So again, it's great character growth because they're now at this end point where they can actually go out and socialise, and their husbands are with them, and that they can actually kick back and enjoy each other's company on a social thing, and it's quite right. Then they celebrate this big victory. So stuff like that. It's all adding nice little icing on the cake sort of thing between them. It's a nice little payoff sort of scene. And we get some more banter about, like, obviously Karen's religious side, and Grace gives her another pickup because Karen's still in a bit of an in-between place because she's still quite down about the system and what have you. But Grace again picks her up very nicely. And one scene I do like between Grace and her husband, because obviously there was a bit of an argument with them about her wanting him to give him the files of, those of the suspects. And she obviously apologises, and she said, I was wrong to sort of act that way. I was wrong. It was a waste of time. And her husband actually reassures her, well, no, it wasn't a waste of time because, I forget the character's name, but the name, obviously, of the cop who she tried to fool in that undercover scene, and he sort of called her bluff, knew who she was. But no, her husband reassures, said, no, he is a bad guy. He's done a lot of bad stuff. So it actually was worthwhile you sort of tracking him down. And I mean, obviously that's open-ended. We don't know if that guy is ever going to get his comeuppance, but certainly he's on the radar. So I think that's what the husband is saying. And then this sort of puts him on the radar so that they can keep an eye on him and investigate him and stuff like that. So it might lead to something in the future. So it's a good pep talk saying, no, it was worthwhile sort of pulling him up and looking into him. So there's some really nice sort of wrapping up scenes, and we just see the growth of the characters and where their relationship is now compared to their relationship when they first started working together. So it's been a great partnership, Grace and Karen. Really endearing, really progressive, because it's so easy for a religious character like Karen to be sort of portrayed as just this stick in the mud or this really kind of hyper aggressive sort of person, and she's not like that at all. And there's a total like mutual respect for Grace and Karen for each other, and they have their differences, but they respect those differences. And they also have a lot in common, a lot of the way they approach policing, and a lot of their passion for the job and the drive to sort of make the world a better place, if you like, make the system a better system. So it's been a great relationship. I just love the scenes between Grace and Karen throughout the drama. So with that, I'll switch to Marie, and obviously for Marie, a lot of the toughness, a lot of the kind of psychological and darker moments have been on her side. I mean, she's the one you really feel for in the drama, just because you see all these things happening to her, and you see the aftermath of what's been happening. And just how life has really dealt her a bad hand, and she's obviously struggled. So we sort of find her in a place where she's finally moving on in her life, and she's working at a fairground. But we see how much what has happened to her has really damaged her, and just put her in a bad sort of place, and maybe. She struggles to see much of a positive future, if you like. But what happens is, early in the episode, Grace and Karen, they get the file passed on of the Marie case, and it's identical to the other file. So they see then there's this other victim out there, which we didn't know about, but her case was never resolved, or it was, but it wasn't resolved satisfactorily. So Grace contacts the detective of the original of Marie's case, the guy who we saw back in episode 1, and he was, I mean, there was 2 of them, and one of them was actually much worse than him. He was very, very cold and harsh with Marie, and just, didn't really have any time to entertain any possible alternatives at all to what she was saying. This guy, who was the original guy, wasn't as bad, but he was still pretty bad. But he was the original guy on the case. So it's him who Grace contacts, and he tells her the same thing. He sort of says, that was a lost cause. We tied that one up because she was found to be making it up, and there was actually a case brought against her. And that's when Grace says, well, no, actually, it turns out she was telling the truth, because this guy has offended elsewhere, and we've got evidence on him now. And it all lines up. So she takes a trip down to I forget the state, but the state where he is, and she visits him and gives him the files. And it seems like that this drama has done really well, because obviously it's been a very meaty, character-driven drama, and you have had some big emotive scenes and some big sort of like acting moments, but also the sort of subtle little visual moments have worked just as well, I feel. And this is one of them, because I mean, Grace is actually very good about it, because I mean, there's probably a side of Grace which is so frustrated and angry than this guy just didn't give Marie a fair shake, and just in a way didn't want to believe her, put pressure on her to say what he wanted her to say. But she's actually not like that with him in the scene. Really, she's very much like, well, here's the evidence, let the evidence speak for itself. And it's a way for him to kind of rectify his mistake almost. I mean, you can never rectify it, because it's sort of gone too far and time has passed now. But to sort of actually see, oh yeah, I was wrong. I have to try and make some sort of amends. So she gives him the evidence and leaves it with him, and she's very... Actually, he might come down to their office, I can't remember. I think he does, because I know she makes a point of, like, offering him, like, a coffee or something like that. But anyway, she leaves the evidence with him. And it's just this nice little visual scene, as I said, him and the evidence, and as he reads through it, it dawns on him then, oh my God, I was so wrong, and the guilt just almost bleeds out of him. It's a great sort of performance. You can see it all in his face. So that leads him to visiting Marie at the fairground, where she's now working, and he talks to her, and it's a very sincere moment, as you might expect it should be. But he's just cut up, and he's devastated about what he did, and he just, he says the city's going to support you in any way you can, and he offers her a check. It's a lot of money. It's a decent amount anyway, but it's obviously small consolation at this point because of what Marie's gone through. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, that cuts to the chase of these things, just how shallow a payoff is, or money is, because yes, it does. It's very practical. It does help you get back on your feet, and there are certain things you can do with that money, but it's never gonna make up for how Marie was treated, and it's never gonna take away just how painful the trauma was of what happened to her. But in any case, he's very sincere. It's obviously you can see in his face and his delivery just how sorry he is, as I says he should be. And Marie's kind of not having it, which you can understand, or she's just very. It's almost like she's very resigned. And again, Caitlin Danver is just amazing in the scene. She just you just see physically just how small she feels, and you can see a little bit of anger in her and almost sarcasm sort of thing. But yeah, she does have this one. I mean, she's on the fence whether to really take the chess check, but he leaves it with her anyway, and then she just has this one sort of big line to him before he leaves, and he just says, or she says, "Next time, do better." And I love that line because it's kind of, you've let me down, but don't let anyone else down. Don't do this again to any other victims. Learn from your mistakes. She's kind of resigned and sort of saying, it's too late now for me. It's too late. I mean, not too late for her, but it's too late for him to make up for what actually happened. No amount of money or offers can really make up for that. So that's the big message for him to do better. So he's learned a lesson from that. And Marie decides she wants to sue the city, which, you can understand that's justified her anger. And it's actually quite a nice thing with her character at this point, which makes logical sense, where she's decided she wants to move on with her life and she wants to move away and get a fresh start. And I think that's probably something people who have been through similar things could probably relate to. It's like literally having gone through this thing, the psychological trauma of it, it's that kind of effect where you never really escape it, especially if you're in the same city, if you're in the same location as the incident happened. It's almost like it's going to be with you, and it probably would be anyway, but I think there is something about leaving and starting again in a new location, new people, etc. It probably there is something to be said about making a fresh start. So you can understand her thinking then she'll use the money to move away. And obviously she has a very good case. And it does come back with a strong offer. She is offered a lot of money, and it would be enough to set her up and give her that new start. But it's actually interesting because her lawyer actually says we could actually go for more here. And I don't know, Marie kind of hesitates at one point and says, I mean, haven't they paid enough or something like that. She might not have quite said that. And there's just this gap, and the lawyer is kind of, just with his face, his expression is kind of saying, well, no. But that's the point again, is that really they can never give her enough money. It'll never make up for what happened and their part in it, if you like. But obviously it is a fresh start for Marie. So she does take the money. We see then she passes her driving test. And you can understand why she wants to leave, because a lot of people around her, I mean, obviously the boy she was seeing was very good to her, very supportive, and we don't know yet if they patch things up because they had a little fight, or we don't see that, whether they patch things up. You maybe hope they would, but we don't actually see that. But obviously her foster parents haven't been great for her, And yeah, it seems like she doesn't have a lot. So a fresh start, you can understand why she would want that. So she gets a driving license, which it's another good payoff because we've seen that. Then she wanted, she was having lessons previously, and she leaves. But before she leaves, she gets Karen's number and she phones her. And this is the final scene of the episode, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's a really emotionally true moment. She talks to Karen and she says, you know, I heard about what you did for me and obviously the other victims. And I just wanted to phone to say thank you. And what's so beautiful about it is it's just this conversation between them, which Karen is in no rush to get off the phone. She wants to listen to Marie, and that's the point. Is Marie wasn't listened to before, not by her counsel, you know, her foster parents, not by the state, not by the detectives. She wasn't given that room to kind of breathe and think about her thoughts and to actually, you know, it was all about them. It was all about the pressure on her. It was all about trying to tie the case up no matter what. But Karen actually gives her that support. She actually listens. And I mean, at one point the conversation does go quite dark, because Marie sort of says that she'd sort of given up hope and she didn't know there were people out there for her. She sort of mentions Grace and Karen and says, you know, it became harder to believe than there were still good people in the world. But she obviously thanks them and says, you know, you were there for me. You were those people. But she also says, if the world is this bad, then I think she says something. I mean, it's quite sort of dramatic. You think, well, was she pondering suicide? Which you might understand if she was, but she sort of says, why do I want to be in it? Is this bad? And Karen, there's no judgment. She just listens and understands. And she says, I can understand that feeling. And that's a beautiful connection between her and Marie, because Karen, I think with that statement, you think, well, she's been wrestling with her conscience a little bit as well, with her faith, being such a religious person. So I really like that, because I think there's obviously a connection between Marie and the pair of them, Grace and Karen, but I think mostly Karen more than Grace. There's that connection. So it's this beautiful moment of catharsis, of Karen listening to Marie and being there for her. And she's very sincere and just says, you're welcome, you know, I was happy to do it. And yeah, I think Marie says, you know, I feel safer with people like you in the world, you and Grace. Gives her hope. It's a whole thing, but it's just beautiful and sincere. And I think this is what I'm going to round up on, because what I really like about this episode is sometimes when drama ties everything up and brings everything like neatly together, sometimes it can feel too much, sometimes it can feel too forced, and that it just would have been best to have just had a bit more ambiguity, a bit more, you know. Then sometimes it just feels a bit like it's hitting you over the head. But this episode, it's just done so well that it doesn't feel like that. And I think it makes sense because of how tough the drama has been throughout. You know, you've had your ups and downs and a lot of downs, and so it actually makes sense. And obviously it's not like it's all rosy, it's all, you know, because Marie is still in a very melancholic sort of place at the end. There's no doubt she still has her issues for understandable reasons. But the point I'm making anyway is then this beautifully pays everything off, but it does it in a subtle way. It does it in a believable way where you don't think things are being forced in just to do that. It feels very logical, but it hits all the points it needs to. And obviously, the whole point of the story is to have these two narratives like bobbling along side to side, and they're the two ends. They're the two like ends of, I don't know the word to say, but Marie and Karen are the two halves, the two very ends, and eventually they're going to be drawn together. And I think by having it as a phone conversation, I think it's actually the perfect way to do it. Because if you'd actually had them meeting up at the end or whatever, I think it might have been a bit too telegraphed, a bit too on the nose, and a bit too, contrived. You might not quite believe it. But there's actually something more beautiful and cathartic about the fact that it's over the telephone, and that there's something more sort of more intimate about that in some ways than just the fact that Karen's there for her and listening. And it makes sense because obviously over the course of the drama they've been in different locations and slowly it's been bringing their links together. So yeah, I think it would have been a bit too forced to actually have them in the same scene together sort of thing in person, and like this big emotional, and maybe having them hugging. I think that would have been a step too far. So to actually have it by telephone and the dialogue and the way it plays out, and it's sort of beautifully, done because Marie is standing by the beach. She's sort of on a cliff, and she's obviously gonna, she's about to start her new life, but she just wanted to do this to sort of tie this up because it was important to say thank you. So it's beautifully done. I don't think they could have done it any better. And that's it. That's the series. I think it's been absolutely amazing bit of drama. It feels the pacing has been really perfect. I think it's very well contained, being 8 episodes. That feels like the perfect length. And it pays everything off. It tells a very important story, some really important themes and questions about the system and about society, how we treat victims. And it has had that levity. It's had those funny moments, those touching moments. So a real mixture, but you really feel like you've been on a ride. You feel like it's done some important things emotionally and had some sharp points. There's been great characters. As I said, the relationship between Grace and Karen has been a real standout. Marie, again, the performance from Caitlin Danver, however you say it, she's just a natural. She's been amazing, and she obviously was great in Booksmart as well. Different sort of thing, obviously, but yeah, she just feels like a natural, and that she has those subtle sort of nuances. So you feel she could be a real talent moving forward, but that's it. That's unbelievable, and not to get too cliche, but it really has been. It's been one of the TV highlights of the year. It's going to be up there for my best of the year, which will be coming soon. I'll be doing a few lists at the end of the year, and one of them will be best TV shows of the year. And unbelievable. I can't say yet if it's going to be number one, but it's certainly going to be up there. It's going to be a tough fight. So there you have it. I know some of you have been watching along and would have finished the show. So please let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and your highlights of the series and of this finale. And thanks for supporting the channel. I should mention before I go, then I recently passed the 100 subscribers. And it's been a great period, really successful, a lot of fun. So thank you for that. Thank you to all the new subscribers. And I hope you stick around and listen to more content. I have plenty more to do. I'm going to get more into the television reviews now than October has gone. And some great stuff to do on TV, as is normally the case. I'm going to hopefully get back to Glow soon. I'm going to do some more Buffy. That's obviously a long-term project. Just yesterday I started actually His Dark Materials, the BBC HBO series. So I posted the first review of that, so you can listen to that if you have an interest. And there will be more horror movie reviews and other stuff. But thank you very much for listening. You can get me up on Twitter if you just look for Keith Beard. I'll put the link in the description below. And check out me on Facebook and also Letterboxd if you wish. But thanks for listening, and more TV reviews to come. Goodbye.